I want to touch on quite a simplistic one, really. Just, I say he is cutting his teeth in management terms, really. He is still relatively inexperienced, but he's doing a brilliant job at it up until now. Just in terms of, if you had to pinpoint a few of his key strengths and why do you think he is being so successful? Obviously, we've spoken about sort of his people skills, his man management skills, and clearly tactically he's very adept and stuff like that as well. But what would you sort of put it down to from an early observation?
A couple of different things, and in no particular order. First thing is there's clearly a reverence for him from younger players. Now that works very well at a club like Leverkusen, because a lot of those players, particularly the ones between 20 and 25, have grown up watching him win European Cups and World Cups, and to be this kind of culturally significant person across European football. The second thing is it's interesting because the way he played, and than I do about this, but you wouldn't expect a particularly fierce person, like a fierce coaching personality. You'd expect him to coach the way he played, which was kind of smooth and as if the game wasn't actually that difficult. Now, if you watch him coach a session, he's pretty fierce. Like he speaks, more languages than exist seemingly effortlessly. He's a brilliant linguist. But both him and his coaching staff are they've got some bite to their bark as well. And that's something that surprised me. Mm-hmm. The third thing is I think from a technical perspective that there are some really interesting things happening in Leverkusen because in nearly every case, what you have are a group of players beyond the kind of the established mature players that we mentioned that came in over the summer. Mm-hmm. Got a lot of players with high potential who are now playing right at the limits of their abilities. Now, that's probably best example of that might be someone like Florian Wirtz, who is going to be, £100 million player one day, but also guys like Kasunu or Tapsoba or Jonathan Tah, who's had a little bit of a career renaissance. Jeremy Frimpong is a great example of someone who had moments before Alonso arrived and was clearly very, very talented, but has become truly a world-class wing-back and one of the most destructive right-sided players in world football under Alonso. Mm-hmm. And that, to me, highlights one of his great strengths. He knows where to put players to best maximise their effect. And I think with Frimpong's a fun example because Frimpong, if you watch Leverkusen enough, you'll have seen that at times he's their furthest player forward. And he's a wing-back and he's better defensively than people give him credit for. Like he's tarnished with that kind of modern fullback wing-back brush, which is, oh, you're all athleticism. Not true. But you see the way that he's been jigsawed into the formation, and the result is, okay, so you have all this width, you have these offsetting fullbacks, wing-backs. One, Grimaldo is more of a playmaker, Frimpong on the other side, who is more dynamic and more of an attacking weapon. But then they're used in a way which allows your internal players, Xhaka, Palacios in there as well, but that's first and foremost because he's the most gifted, to have all this central space. And collectively, you kind of optimize everybody's role on the field. And also, the amount of times, and this is the one thing I think a lot of Bundesliga coaches haven't worked out, and one of the reasons why they've remained unbeaten, they outnumber oppositions so often. Like, they're not a transition-heavy side, which is unusual for the Bundesliga. They are a good presser without being a kind of a relentless counter presser. And yet they always have these numerical mismatches, and that's just good coaching. And so I haven't think actually that it's the Bundesliga style is always thought to be that kind of that old 2010 to 2013 Jurgen Klopp thing, with the heavy transitions, and that's all there is. I think this is a sort of best of both worlds. I think Leverkusen do a lot of things that, for instance, Guardiola's Bayern Munich did quite well in terms of their ball retention, but they also have elements of that Klopp style. And so I think the portrait it paints is of a coach who has absorbed so many different influences. And if you think about the kind of the coaches he played under, right, it makes sense. So all around, it's a spectacle. And I live in Germany, and the Bundesliga is close to my heart. And Alonso's Leverkusen have been a real shot in the arm of the division. Because yes, the story is a little bit about Bayern Munich not being very good. Yeah. It's also about the excellence of this side. And and a great coaching story. So it's just that's not really the question you asked. I gave you like 4 different answers to different questions, but that's what I've taken away from watching it. And these are all things which could be attributed to his strengths in whatever way you want to, really.
No, amazing. Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right to mention how a lot of the media attention, particularly in recent days, as we record this, has been about Thomas Tuchel and the underperforming Bayern Munich, whilst the headline, moreover, should be how well Bayer Leverkusen are playing. Absolutely agree with you on that front.
Well, there's one thing to add to that. In the it absolutely it should, because last season, yes, Bayern Munich won the title, but they won the title with their lowest points tally since, well, I think it's about 13 years. The last time they finished third in the division. So. Bayern Munich have not been great, but they've got to be beaten. And there are many years previously when they haven't been, and when they've been able to get away with it in inverted commas as a result, their financial advantage or psychological hold over the league. And you got to go out and do it. And not the easiest thing in the world in a place like Leverkusen.
No, absolutely no. Well, Leverkusen, as it's more potentially familiarly known, as I've found out in the past few weeks. In terms of sort of weaknesses, then, I've been hard pressed to find or hear from anybody who can sort of nail down any weaknesses of Xabi Alonso's coaching, albeit early days yet, which I guess is testament to the job he's doing. Can you sort of spot any within there? You mentioned how he is with the media. Obviously, personality-wise, he comes across brilliantly. Man management, he seems to have it nailed down. Can you think of anything? Now, is it simply a case of a lack of experience, which can't really be helped?
I think his weaknesses are theoretical, because the one thing you got to understand about Leverkusen is it's a very small place. Also, Bayer Leverkusen as a football team attract no media attention whatsoever. In fact, beyond Bayern Munich, with the occasional sort of Borussia Dortmund interruption, there is no other story in town. And so Alonso has not yet really experienced what it's like to be on the end of a negative cycle. So bad results in his first year, because it did take a little bit of time to get going. Nobody cared, because it was the Nagelsmann circus, and then Tuchel coming in, and then Salihamidzic and Oli Khan getting sacked. So there is always a Bayern Munich story that attracts the media's glare. Yeah. So don't know how he would, for instance, if you were to be a head coach in Munich or in Liverpool or in Madrid, how do you cope with that? Because bright light there, it's different. These are bigger cities, these are footballing powers. And also, Leverkusen are built to be in a permanent state of renewal. So the idea, if you talk to people who work at the club in their recruiting department, you recruit players who in 2 or 3 years are going to go on to replace other players who they know are going to be sold, who they intend to sell at the right point. Liverpool don't act like that. Bayern Munich don't act like that. So how do you, when you don't have the kind of the fluctuations that sort of cycle creates an excuse for and an asterisk against, how do you cope with that? Similarly, there are no superstars at Bayer Leverkusen. The closest you've probably got is Granit Xhaka, yes, but Florian Wirtz. And Wirtz is quite a shy person. He's quite when you watch him, and obviously the German media have a big interest in him ahead of the European Championship. When you watch them clamour around him, he's quite inhibited in a way that, like, a true superstar of the game, Mohamed Salah, for instance, just would never be. But at the same time, if you put Alonso into a situation with a lot of high-profile players, how does he behave there? Like, how does he deal with the ego that comes with that? Like, Leverkusen is a mix of players who are trying to improve, probably to move elsewhere in their careers, whereas Real Madrid, Bayern Munich, Liverpool, like these clubs, their destination, right? And if you're a player, you're not, I don't think you're tuned to behave in quite the same way. I have no idea whether that will prove a strength or weakness of his. It's just at the moment, he hasn't experienced it. So we'll see. So it's not that there are weaknesses, there are just questions.